It was a sunny afternoon at Avril Secondary School in the city of Port Harcourt. The school bell had just rung for break, and students poured out of their classes, laughing, shouting, and chasing one another down the corridors. Obiora sat at his desk, absent-mindedly spinning his pen between his fingers when she walked in. Amanda. She was a new student, and from the moment she stepped in, she commanded attention. Her uniform, a neatly ironed white shirt and navy blue skirt, fit her perfectly. But it wasn't her looks that made Obiora's heart skip. It was the way she carried herself, confident yet not arrogant, like she already knew where she belonged. The teacher introduced her, but Obiora barely heard a word. He was too busy watching her, memorizing the curve of her smile, the way she nodded slightly as she listened, and the small dimple that appeared whenever she pursed her lips. For the first time in his 15 years of life, Obiora felt something shift inside of him. Few days passed, and Obiora still couldn't shake the thought of Amanda. Every chance he got, he stole glances at her, wondering if she had noticed him. Then, one Friday afternoon, fate decided to intervene. The rain had begun unexpectedly, drumming loudly against the classroom roof, making it impossible for students to hear the teacher. By the time school was over, the entire compound was soaked, and students huddled down the verandas, waiting for the downpour to subside. Amanda stood by herself, arms wrapped around her books. Obiora, who had been hanging out with his friends, saw her and took a deep breath before walking over. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. She turned to him, her brown eyes warm despite the cold. "Hi," she replied shyly. "You're waiting for the rain to stop?" She nodded. "My house isn't far, but I hate walking in the rain." Obiora hesitated, then shrugged off his school blazer and held it up. "Come, I'll walk you." Amanda looked at him, amused. "What about you?" "I'm already wet," he laughed. "Might as well be useful." She hesitated for a second before smiling and stepping under the jacket. Together, they walked down the road, rain splattering their shoes, and just like that, everything changed. From that day on, Obiora and Amanda became inseparable. They walked to school together and sat next to each other every chance they got. Amanda loved music, and Obiora always teased her about her obsession with Davido's songs. "You're telling me you don't like Assurance?" she would ask, pressing an earphone to his ear. "It's all right," he would shrug. She would smack his arm playfully. "You have no taste." Obiora loved football, and Amanda would sit on the sidelines during inter-house sports, cheering him on, even though she didn't understand the game. One evening after school, they stopped by a suya stand by the roadside. Amanda licked the suya pepper off her fingers and grinned at him. "You're my best friend," she said suddenly. Obiora's heart pounded. "Yeah?" he asked, his voice quieter. She nodded. "I've never had a best friend before." He wanted to tell her he felt more than friendship, that every time she laughed, his chest tightened, that he couldn't imagine his days without her in them. But he was scared, so he just smiled and said, "Me neither." They both giggled shyly. Amanda and Obiora were inseparable. It was as if the universe had carved them out of the same star, aligning their lives in perfect harmony. Their classmates noticed. "Are you two dating?" Blessing, Amanda's seatmate, teased one afternoon during lunch. Amanda rolled her eyes. "No, we're just best friends." "Best friends don't look at each other the way you two do," Blessing said. Amanda didn't respond. Instead, she stole a glance at Obiora across the classroom. He was laughing at something his friend Justin said, but as if he could feel her eyes on him, he turned. Their eyes met. Amanda's stomach flipped. She looked away quickly, cheeks warm. That night, As she lay in bed, she wondered why her heart had started beating differently whenever Obiora was near. The next day after school, while they walked home together as usual, Amanda noticed that Obiora was quieter than usual. So Amanda asked him, "What's up?" He hesitated, then shoved his hands into his pockets. "I was thinking about what Blessing said about us." She glanced at him, trying to keep her voice light. "Okay." And he turned towards her. While staring into her beautiful eyes, he said, "I think I like you." Amanda's heart nearly leaped out of her chest. "You think?" He let out a nervous chuckle. "Okay, I know I like you a lot." She had imagined this moment before, late at night when her mind wandered, but she never thought it would happen. "I like you too," she admitted softly. Obera's lips parted slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to say it back. "For real?" Amanda laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "For real." Then, suddenly shy, he looked down at his shoes. "So, what now?" Amanda thought about it for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "This," she said, entangling her fingers with his. For the rest of the walk home, they didn't say much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with stolen glances, shy smiles, and the unspoken promise of something new, something beautiful. One evening, as Obiora and Amanda sat at a picnic garden, which was their usual spot, something felt different. Amanda was quiet, too quiet. Obiora watched her, his heart drumming against his ribs. Amanda was wrong. She exhaled, rubbing her arms as if suddenly cold. "My dad got transferred to Abuja." There was silence. Obiora's breath hitched. He blinked as if he hadn't heard her right. "What?" She turned to face him now, her eyes full of something raw, something that made his stomach twist. "We're moving at the end of the term." A sharp, invisible knife sliced through Obiora's chest. "No," he shook his head. "No, you can't go. I don't want to." Obera's mind raced. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. They had plans. They were going to finish secondary school together, graduate, and even attend the same university. He couldn't picture his days without her. "Then don't." Amanda gave a soft, sad laugh. "It's not that simple, Obiora." "Yes, it is." He stood up suddenly, his voice rising with desperation. "You can stay with your aunt here in Port Harcourt, or your dad can refuse the transfer. Something, anything." Amanda stood too, her face a mix of frustration and pain. "You think I haven't thought about that?" I begged him, Obiora, but he said it's not up for discussion. "We have to go." The finality of her words felt like a punch to the gut. Obiora inhaled shakily, turned away from her. His chest was tight, his mind screaming for a solution. Then, before he could stop himself, the words left his mouth. "I love you." The confession hung between them. Amanda's breath hitched. Her fingers curled into fists by her sides. "Obiora, I love you," he repeated, his voice softer this time. He turned to her, his eyes pleading. "I don't know when it happened, but it did. And I can't imagine waking up and not seeing you at school, not walking you home, not having you here." Tears welled up in Amanda's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I thought you'd never say it," she whispered. Obiora frowned. "What?" Amanda let out a shaky laugh, wiping a tear from the corner of her eyes. "I've loved you for months, Obiora. I was just waiting for you to realize it." His breath caught in his throat. A rush of emotions swelled through him, feelings of relief, joy. He took a step closer, his hands itching to hold her. "Then don't go," he begged one last time. Amanda looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "If I had a choice, I would stay. I swear I would." Obiora clenched his fist, his body trembling with emotions too big to contain. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he reached out for her, pulling her into his arms. Amanda melted against against him, her arms wrapping tightly around his waist as if she could hold on tight enough to stop time from moving. They stood like that for what felt like forever. "I love you," she whispered against his shoulder. Obiora closed his eyes. He had never hated reality more than he did in that moment. The last day of school arrived too soon, stealing the time Obiora thought he had left. The sky was unusually dull that morning, as if the universe itself mourned what was about to happen. Obiora had barely slept the night before. His mind replayed every moment with Amanda. The first time they met, the first time she laughed at his jokes, the way her hand fits perfectly in his, and now today he had to say goodbye. His stomach felt hollow as he walked to school. He dreaded seeing her. He dreaded not seeing her. And then there she was. Amanda stood by the gate, her school bag slung over one shoulder, her white shirt neatly tucked into her navy blue skirt. But her usually bright eyes were dull, weighed down with the sadness she tried to hide. He wanted to run to her, to do something, anything, to stop this. Instead, he swallowed the lump in his throat and forced himself forward. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse. Amanda turned, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she smiled painfully. "Hey." They both knew this wasn't like every other morning. The day dragged on. Every class felt pointless, and life moved on, completely unaware that two hearts were quietly shattering. At break time, Obiora and Amanda sat behind the old mango tree in the school compound, away from the noise. She played with the hem of her skirt. "I still can't believe this is happening," she whispered. Obiora clenched his jaw. "You can still change your mind. Stay." Amanda gave him a sad smile. "You know I can't." A heavy silence fell between them. Then, hesitantly, Amanda reached into her school bag and pulled out a small notebook. She held it out to him. "What's this?" he asked. "My journal," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wrote letters to you in it, things I wanted to say but never did." Obera's fingers tightened around the book. He wanted to open it right then, but he was scared of what he would find. Amanda bit her lips. "I want you to have something to remember me by." His heart clenched, as if I could ever forget you. A tear slipped down her cheek, and Obiora wiped it away gently with his thumb. For the first time, he wasn't afraid to touch her, to hold her as if she was his to hold forever. She wasn't. The final bell rang, jarring them back to reality. Amanda sniffled and wiped her face quickly. "I have to go home and pack." The words were like a death sentence. Obiora stood with her, their hands brushing but not holding. The weight of everything pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. They walked out of the school gate together, each step heavier than the last. When they reached the spot where they always parted ways, Amanda turned to him, her lower lip trembling. "This is it," she said. Obiora fought against the tightness in his throat. "Promise me something," he said quickly. Amanda nodded, desperate. "Anything. Promise me this isn't the end." She hesitated, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read. Then finally she whispered, "I promise." A car horn blared from down the street, her father's car. Amanda sucked in a shaky breath. Obiora. He didn't let her finish. He grabbed her, pulling her into a desperate, breathless hug. Amanda's hands clung to the back of his shirt as if letting go would break her. Maybe it would. Then she pulled back, and before he could stop her, she turned and ran to the waiting car. Obiora stood frozen. She didn't look back. The car door shut. The engine roared to life, and just like that, Amanda was gone. Obiora walked home in a daze, his feet moving without direction. The world around him felt blurred, distant, like he was trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. When he got to his room, he collapsed onto his bed, pulling out Amanda's journal with shaky hands. Slowly he flipped open the cover, his eyes scanning the first page. Written in Amanda's elegant handwriting was the last thing he expected to see. "I have to tell you a secret before I leave." Obiora's pulse pounded in his ears. What secret? His fingers trembled as he turned the page. And then a loud knock on his door startled him. "Obiora!" His mother's voice was sharp and it felt urgent. He looked up, frowning. "Yes, Mom?" She pushed the door open, her face pale. "It's Amanda." Obiora's heart stopped. What about Amanda? His mother hesitated, then swallowed hard. "She never made it to Abuja."